Welcome to the Whiskey Couch. My name is Gustav Miller, and today's two whiskies are the Maker's Mark and also the Maker's 46 Kentucky Bourbon from America. And this is an interesting bourbon. Normally the American whiskies are spelled with the EY at the end, but in the case of both these Maker's Mark, you will see there, right there, that they dropped the E and they're spelling it just with the Y at the end instead of the normal EY for American bourbon. And the reason why they did that is simply to honor the Scottish heritage of whiskey, because in Scotland whiskey is spelled only with a Y. But let me not get ahead of myself. Maker's Mark and Maker's 46. The Maker's Mark distillery was first founded in 1954 and it's situated in Loretto, Kentucky, currently owned by Beam Suntory. For 50 years, Maker's Mark produced only this bourbon for more than 50 years. And then a couple of years ago in 2010, they added this new Maker's 46 edition to their whiskey. Jim Murray in the Whiskey Bible awarded this Maker's Mark 91 out of 100 and this one 95 out of 100, which makes this a liquid gold whiskey. Now, Bill Samuels Sr. first produced this whiskey in 1953. Normally in American bourbon, the combination of grains used to make bourbon will include a high percentage of corn, according to law, more than 51%, in this case 70%, and then normally also rye and malted barley. But Bill Samuels Sr. decided that he's going to swap out the rye with wheat, which was an interesting move. So corn, wheat, and malted barley, which gives you a much sweeter whiskey at the end of the day. And of course matured in charred American white oak barrels. Now there's no age statement, especially for this Maker's Mark, but apparently matured for around 5 to 7 years in charred American oak barrels. This one, 45% alcohol by volume, and the Maker's 46, 47% alcohol by volume. Now, the only difference between these two, the Maker's Mark is the basic Maker's Mark bourbon. The Maker's 46 is the basic Maker's Mark with one difference. At the end of its 5 to 7 years maturation in charred American white oak barrels, they add 10 limousine French oak staves that they toasted beforehand. The toasting is to caramelize the natural wood sugars, and then they add those 10 staves into the barrels and they leave the barrels for another 3 or 4 months, especially during winter time, to give it that extra maturation and that extra wood contact. One tiny, seemingly insignificant but very important difference, and you will just now hear the difference that it made between these two whiskies. There we go. Maker's Mark whiskey. A very nice golden amber color, and on the nose it's quite subtle. No alcohol burn there on the nose. I'm impressed. Quite a subtle nose. Sweet candy corn, the vanilla, the honey, the cinnamon, the oak spice slightly. A little bit of oak spice right at the back there. And of course the apple and the brown sugar. This one a little bit darker because of that extra maturation in the barrels with the French oak staves. You've got the same foundation than the Maker's Mark, but there's much more. There's much more in here. There's more depth, more depth. The cinnamon is not straightforward cinnamon. It's like cereal dusted with cinnamon. It's like apples dusted with cinnamon. And the brown sugar is not straightforward brown sugar. It's like a dark, intense brown sugar. Sweet corn, vanilla, caramel, creamy, apples, cinnamon, but there's also a bit of a bite there, a gingery bite, and then some nuts. Maker's Mark. It's a very pleasant bourbon. Maker's Mark 46. Well balanced. Definitely more complex. Creamy. Oily. The brown sugar is still there, and all the other flavors from the Maker's Mark in this Maker's 46. But I'm getting like stewed red fruit with cinnamon dusted over and some honey sprinkled over. Well done. Job well done. That extra few months of those staves, worthwhile. The finish on the Maker's Mark, it's like a medium long finish with the caramel and the apple, but with a bit of a peppery end and a bit drying at the end. The Maker's 46, much longer finish, definitely much longer finish. The oak wood spices here on the side of my tongue, but the caramel and the apple lingering, I still have it in my mouth, it's still there. It's just lingering. Very good bourbon. The basic Maker's Mark and the Maker's 46 with those few extra months maturation with the oak staves in the barrels. If I had to pair these two whiskies, and I'm going to recommend some pairing for either one of those, I'll go for caramelized nuts. Caramelized nuts will be a good flavor companion. If you want to go a bit lighter, I will consider something like a caramelized caramel popcorn. If you want to incorporate this in a dish, I will consider pairing it with a dessert. I'm just picturing apple crumble, warmed up apple crumble with vanilla custard and maybe vanilla ice cream. I'd recommend those as a pairing for these two Kentucky bourbons. Thank you for watching. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'll see you tomorrow with more whiskey tasting and whiskey pairing and whiskey reviews. Cheers.